Communicate very clearly why you're making the moves that you're making. That builds trust with people because nobody wants to feel like, oh, I gotcha.
Fire, earth, wind, water. This is the Elemental Educator. And now your host, Tyler Como.
Hello and welcome to the Elemental Educator Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, and today we have a special guest that embodies the elements through instructional coaching and strong cultures. Joining us is Erinn Cottman. Erinn is a leadership and teacher development coach with a passion for instructional coaching and building strong cultures. Erinn understands that bettering students means getting through to them easier, but that understanding means meeting them where they are, not where you wish they would just hurry up and get to already. It means having the cultural knowledge, wherewithal, and resilience to really get the job done. Welcome to the Elemental Educator Podcast, Erinn. It's a pleasure to have you here.
I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to unpack this conversation. That we'll see where it goes. My first thing that I want to just jump into is, what's your story? How did you get to where you are now?
So again, my name is Erinn. I'm an Atlanta-based education consultant. I actually fell into teaching years ago. I was a 2010 TFA core member, but had a whole career, I say whole, but it was like 2 years before that as a journalism major. So I was living in New York and working at magazines, ended up moving to Atlanta and was like, okay, you know what? Let me give this teaching thing a try, which is, I think it's all destined. I come from a line of teachers. My brother's a teacher. My grandfather was a teacher and principal for a very long time. So education is not new to my family. It was just, I think teaching isn't the most like sexy thing, as we like to say, right? So I think it was me being young and wanting to be in journalism, but I fell into teaching and loved it. Stayed at my placement school for 15 years. Which is like odd for TFA. That's not normally a thing, but stayed for 15 years. Stayed for 15 years, fell in teaching, taught 5th grade and 7th grade English and reading, moved into being a coach, an instructional coach. And that's when I really fell in love with the idea of coaching and development for teachers. Then spent my time as an AP and then eventually ended up launching my business, Erinn Cottman Teacher Development. And we actually just celebrated year 4 of the business. And so I get to each and every day, thank you, get to work with schools and school leaders, instructional leaders specifically, on how to build, maintain, create a culture of coaching, because I believe that is truly how you actually get teachers to thrive and stay in the field, and then their kids thrive, right? We know the longer a teacher is present and in the classroom, the better kids will be off. And that's the very fast version of how I ended up here.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's so nice to unpack that with you. And you've alluded to it, but the earth element for me is our values, our beliefs, what we're rooted in. What would you say your core value or your earth when you first got into education, and do you find that that's still your value?
So that's interesting. So at one, I think our values change as we experience more life, as we have maybe multiple moments in our lives. Honestly, the value I was led with at the very beginning was curiosity, because I had no formal teaching experience, like training, right? I was a journalism major. So I just came into a space where I was just trying to soak up and attach myself to as much as I could. If you were a bomb teacher, I was in your classroom and I was watching and I was taking, right? I was just trying to soak up all that I could and really lean into the development that I was getting. I worked at a high performing charter network where one of their really big, I would say, positives was development. And so immediately I never had a year I didn't have a coach. I never had a year I didn't have a strong coach. So I really leaned into like curiosity and being coachable. I think as the years have gone by, that obviously has maintained, because that's what I do now, but like in a new seat. But the other core value that I really lean into is joy. I feel like this work can be really hard and really daunting and emotional. And so over the years to stay in it, I've had to really lean on joy. And so whether I'm working with a client or I'm doing a PD, like joy is heavily infused into what I do. My clients get mad at me a lot because they'll call me to complain. I'm like, okay, what went good today? What made you smile? Not to dismiss the parts that are really real to them, but also just understanding when you don't anchor yourself in some joy in this, you're gonna burn out really quickly.
That's so true. And teaching specifically, but even leadership in general, is both the most thankful and the most thankless
1,000%.
job you could ever think of. You can put your heart and soul into a situation and it could work out perfectly and it goes unnoticed. But on the flip side, you could also pour your heart and soul into something. And then 10 years later, that is still something that people are coming back to you on and bringing you joy over something that you were able to help
Yep.
be a part of a
Yep.
difference in. So, Erinn, in your work, it's very clear that you emphasize the importance of aligning with the school's vision and mission. Can you share how you help school leaders reinforce these elements effectively in their
Yeah.
daily
So
operations?
I'm big on mission and vision because I think a lot of times these are things that we create and then that's it. Like we don't revisit them. They don't actually anchor us in our day to day. And I think that's oftentimes what creates a lot of confusion in schools is because we are not all mission and vision aligned. So the first thing a school leader has to be able to do is really clarify and communicate that vision and mission. One of the things that I always tell my clients is like, what's your theme for the year? And how does it align to your mission and vision? For example, I had a principal once, we had our school burned down, which is so extreme, but it happened. And
It's happened in
listen,
a couple
right?
places, actually. It's not the
Yeah.
first time I've
And
heard this. So,
the theme for the rest of the year was a phoenix, like a bird that rises from the ashes.
okay.
And you can't tell me that
Yeah.
didn't unite us as a team. It was the idea that no matter what comes our
Yeah.
way, no matter what happens, we move forward. And he always aligned it to our mission and vision of our school. And so you've got to be able to storytell and create stories as a leader. That's what people care about. They've got that's you can see now that I've had two principals since then. But the thing that I remember is that moment with that leader, right? So the clarity and being able to communicate through storytelling is really important for a leader. You also have to have the like I'm big on systems. So I tell my clients, "Hey, you can't give your mission and vision at the top of the year and then we don't revisit. It should be a part of every meeting before you start. I don't it should be a part of every meeting, every community gathering. Like it needs to be front and center at all times for people. You've got to model that. So you can't say that this is our mission and vision and then the way that you move throughout the building or the way that your decisions and choices and where you put your money are not reflected in that mission and vision. People will notice that very quickly. I also think about your ability to take feedback and reflect. So like how am I regularly reflecting on the fact that we are actually living and breathing our mission and vision each day? And then you have to have tangible goals. So if for example you're saying that part of your mission is you are a project based learning school, right, or your vision for your school, then I should see that in the curriculum. I should see goals around the implementation, right? So there should be, yes, this vision, but then you've got to
Yeah.
get strategic and have goals and be able to model that along.
I love that because a big thing that I preach on this show is needing to have that core value, that earth. And for a lot of us, we take that earth and we blast it as a mission and vision. And within an organization, that's perfectly okay. But you also need to act on that mission and vision, and you need to do it with intention. If you're just listening to this episode on its release date in September, you're a month into your school year, you can action something tomorrow. You can bring it to a part of your conversation. And if you're not in North America and you're somewhere else where school is happening year round, maybe you're near the end of your school year, whatever it might look like for you,
Yep.
you can start this tomorrow. You can have that conversation. You just have to go read your mission. Ask yourself right now, do you know it? And if not, maybe that's where we need to start, is knowing how we're making decisions and why we're making decisions. So, Erinn, with this though, you also incorporate your understanding of cultural knowledge and resilience into coaching to strengthen educational leadership.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
So resilience is really important to me simply because my years, watched some really great teachers have to leave because of a lack of resilience. And I don't say that to be like mean or nitpicky, but just not really having the skill set to support themselves through some of the hard work. And that's sad, right? Because then at the end of the day, kids miss out on that. And I think the first thing is really as leaders, making sure that you have a practice for self-reflection, whether that's daily, weekly, monthly. But like I always would drive home, I had to drive between school and getting my son. And I would use that to say, what went really well today? What did not? And how am I responding based upon that for tomorrow? And then that allowed me then, by the time I picked him up, it's done. I'm done talking about it. I'm done thinking about it, because that's also part of that reflection process. So you've got to be able to do that. You've got to also think through like your own identity and how does it show up. So I'm obviously a Black woman. If you're not visually looking at this, I'm a Black woman. And
If you're watching on YouTube, you are.
so that means I have to know how I show up in rooms and spaces, right? And what bias that I might be bringing to a space or an environment is really important. So that's all going to be a part of your self-reflection. It's all also, you have to think about your community, right? So if I know my community and who I serve, that's going to be that's going to help me to be able to make the right decisions and strengthen my leadership, right? Even small things, right? Like we at one point, I remember really going back and forth about uniform policy and thinking ourselves like, yes, we love this particular shirt, but like, why do we do? Because we've just always worn this shirt? Or does it make more sense knowing my community has siblings and cousins all through the school? Does it make more sense to just say, hey, because we know we're going to do hand-me-downs? Does it just make more sense to say, wear one of our shirts? I don't care what color it is, just wear one of our shirts, right? So even those small nuanced things are things that can create hardships for our community that we don't necessarily think about. So you have to know your community. What are they engaged in? What's their current problems? I'm in Atlanta, right? So Atlanta, we have like many large cities, a huge gentrification problem. And so I have families that I really actually want to go to this school, but I can't even afford to live in this neighborhood anymore. So you've got to know the community issues that are also going on around you. And because the worst thing as a leader is to come off as being like completely like dumb or irrelevant to like what is happening around you, right? And you're just like, that didn't hit the mark because I didn't have the context of the community around me. And then policy and practice review. I think I talked about that a little bit too. I really push leaders to think about, why are we doing what we do? Education in schools are a lot of, because we've always done it that way. That's how we've always done it. That's our history. But why? Why? And if we're not evolving and changing, like I've seen a lot of conversation about cell phone policies. And you've got to constantly be thinking about the policies and practices that you have in place and why they exist. And are they responsive, culturally responsive and equitable? A lot of the policies, especially in private and charter schools, a lot of the policies that we have in place are not equitable. Doesn't mean you're coming from a bad place.
Yeah. And you're hitting all of the
they may
relevant
have
topics
come from
here.
I'm not saying that people, 9 times out of 10, the policy I've put in place, typically I think I'm doing a service to someone, but sometimes that's just not how that actually lands anymore. So that's another big one. So it's like self-reflection, community engagement, and policy and practice review.
Love that. Erinn, there's 2 things that are really standing out to me right now. And the first one was your story about how you started in journalism and then you got into teaching and the 2 didn't relate. You are such a good storyteller and your journalism background probably comes out in your ability to tell these stories. So I think there is a pretty good relation between your success in what you're doing and actually your background in journalism, because it's made you so great at sharing stories. Second thing that stood out to me here is you talked about the uniform and you talked about something as simple as a shirt and the bias that we bring when we enter the room. And I just finished a podcast episode. There's a very powerful message behind this, behind the implicit decisions you are having people pursue, and something as simple as forcing people to wear the same thing all the time and not being able to switch that up. You're telling them that you already can't be innovative or creative. You can't be yourself. You're putting them into a confinement. And it's that implicit message that you send as soon as you give that. Now, with that, something really, to me, and I'm sure really powerful to you as well, and that's within the earth, we want to meet students where they are and not where we wish they were. So how do you guide school leaders to cultivate this mindset within their teaching staff?
So I developed our company focuses around building a culture of coaching, as I said earlier. And so we developed a framework, and one of those things is data, right? And being able to be data literate and use data. We've created a space in schools where data is scary to people. We don't want to look at data. It's because in some places it's been used to be punitive, right? And so we've created a lot of anxiety around data, but in order to move students, you've got to know their data. You have to look at data constantly, and it has to be literally a culture of data. So we try and work with leaders and teachers to understand, in order to have a culture of coaching. So that's the first thing. We all have to understand that I don't care if you're the front office manager, the operations manager, the lunch lady, like principal, everyone in your school should have some sort of coaching and development happening. That's a true culture of coaching. And so first you have to start there with this idea of we all can improve. That includes students, families, like we all can improve. And then once we've established that the culture here is we're all improving and working on something, then the expectation should be that's the same for kids, right? You would think so. That's the same for kids. And in order to do that, we have to be constantly looking at data to help us make decisions. And we have to understand and help teachers get that data is empowering. I always say, like, data, like, I want the data so I know what to do. Otherwise, I feel helpless. I don't know what to do because I don't have the data. So we've got to make sure that teachers have the right data. They have access to the data. We're giving them the right data. I've been in some places where I'm like, this is too much data. I don't even know where to start with this. Are we looking at the right thing? So I think there's that. And then helping them to be able to identify and build that muscle in them. We have to be constantly pushing growth mindset. And I think this is where coaches come in, right? Because coaches, we're going to listen to the frustration of the teacher. I've tried this, I've tried that. I'm not getting any headway. We've got to be able to hear that while also really balancing the message of they're here to learn. That's the whole point. If they knew everything, they wouldn't be here. And so it's our job to empower teachers to feel good about the fact that there's growth that can still be made and not make them feel like you're not making it happen fast enough. I think that's the other thing, especially post-pandemic, is everything's we're behind. And the reality is they were behind before that. We've got to, yes, there's an urgency, but that scaring thing isn't going to motivate me to move faster. And the other piece is collaboration and support. How are you allowing teachers, whether it's your PLCs, where it's co-planning, however your school has decided to structure it, but how are you allowing collaboration? How are you taking, a lot of schools will have that one or two classrooms that's really rocking it, like they're the rock star classroom, but haven't figured out how to take that, bottle it up, and put it in other places. So instead of just saying, Miss Smith is amazing, great. What is Miss Smith doing? What are the tangible strategies that Miss Smith is doing that can be taken and taught elsewhere? And that's the disconnect piece.
Absolutely. And it's so important when you're making decisions off of data, and this is a bit of our fire element coming in. It needs to be rooted to your earth. And you mentioned it, there's a ton of data out there that we can overwhelm ourselves in and looking at. We need to sift through it. We need to talk about what is our earth, what is our guiding value here, and what data helps us inform us if we're achieving our guiding value, if we're achieving our mission and we're achieving our vision. Because there is data out there that's just numbers to people that has no alignment whatsoever. Now, with that though, and the idea of continuous improvement, we start to bring up and recognize that every organization has weaknesses. And you've written about the necessity of analyzing a school's strengths and weaknesses. Could you discuss a challenging scenario where this analysis led to improvement?
First, I think it starts with leadership, right? You have to have leadership that says, okay, something's not right here. And sometimes I think bringing in outside help really allows you to get out of the fog of it and get some other eyes on it. So I work with a lot of middle schools. I was a middle school teacher in AP. So I love the crazy middle school age. So I worked with one that was really just like a lot of schools struggling with low engagement and just poor academic performance, specifically in math and reading, like most schools, right? And then a lot of teachers were just turning over, right? And then when you went from classroom to classroom, you would see no cohesion, instructional strategy and approach, right? Which, yes, have autonomy, but there should be certain things across the school that back to mission and vision, right? If we say this is how our approach to instruction is, we should see elements of that, right, in each classroom. And despite there being turnover, those that were there were committed, right? They had a community of teachers and parents and boards that were like on board with them. And they also had fabulous fine arts program, right? So they had some of those strengths. You've got to identify the strengths because those can help you identify and fix some of those weaknesses. But then again, their weaknesses, they had instructional practices that were all over the place. They weren't providing enough development for their teachers either, right? Not using their coaches to the best of their ability. And then obviously as a teacher, when I start seeing my colleagues walk out the door, there's a natural low morale that kind of can start to take place. And then they had data, but they weren't really using the data effectively, all the things we talked about. So the first thing we did was say, okay, I'm big on if there's a gap for instruction, how are you supporting teachers through that? Like this whole notion that teachers should just know. We know at this point that we know for a fact that teacher preparation programs aren't really that great, right? They're not really truly preparing teachers for like real world classroom experiences, right? And we know that we're also getting a lot of teachers from other sources, right? So you have to have some sort of professional development scope and sequence that's going to help you navigate the issues and the trends that you're seeing. So we implemented a PD plan that was not just like that was targeted, right? That's why teachers hate PD, because half the time the PD doesn't apply to them. That's why they don't like it. It's not that they don't like PD, it's that this is a waste of my time, right? So, how does this PD, right, align with the issues that we're seeing, the trends that we're seeing? We worked on a framework for instruction. So, if this is our mission and vision, what does that actually look like in a framework? What curriculums are we choosing that align with that framework? How are we using the data, and what data do we want to collect, making it accessible for them? We adjusted the schedule to assure that they had times for PLCs. So that's to answer that low morale piece. Now I'm getting in groups, right? And I'm building that teamwork and that feeling of community. And then we just also focused on strengths too. Like, how can we use the fact that we've got this really great fine arts program that shows us that students are engaged? They can be engaged. They're just not engaged in your math class. So I don't want to hear anymore that they're not engaged. They are, right? But what is happening besides, right? Absolutely. What are the structures and things, and how are we doing some cross-curricular connections to help do that? So really, it was like looking at the strengths and the weaknesses, but then getting some targeted interventions. I think what happens is schools get overwhelmed and they don't know where to start. And then they also start with trying to combat too many things or getting too fancy. If you listen, all I said was development support, framework, data, collab. That's it. Those are not huge things, but the thing was those were implemented and they were done consistently.
That's so true. And we're full on into the air element now, which is how we face adversity, to then lead to the water element of implementing change. So you blended the two together there, which I love because they should be blended and considered together. A big part of this, though, is you could be working with the best school, the highest ranked one, and we're still going to find things that they can work on to improve on, because there's no school out there that's absolutely flawless. And it doesn't matter what it is you're bringing to them. As soon as you bring that air element in, and as soon as you talk about adversity, people's morale is going to go down. People are going to feel defeated. They're going to feel like they're not at their best. What strategy do you recommend for maintaining that morale and motivating among educators, especially when facing that adversity?
So the first thing is ask, right? Like, how do you want to, what motivates you? I think a lot of times as leaders, we just decide for people, let's do a outing. Some people are like, I don't want to hang out with you. What is going to actually motivate me and get me excited? And I think that's, again, where your coaches and like your mid-level leadership come in. I had to recognize early on as a AP, because I went from teacher, coach, AP in the same school, right? So at one point when I became an AP, I'm like, oh, you guys don't really want to talk to me like that. You know what I mean? Because now I'm the boss, which is fine, right? Like, I had a good relationship, but there's still like this understanding of like, you're my boss, right? And so I had to start sending out, we had a joy team. I had to start sending out my joy team to be like, I need you to hit the streets and figure out what people want, right? What's going to make them feel motivated? What's good, right? And so that's also that too, is do you need a joy committee? It sounds crazy, but it works. I promise you it works. And also too, as leaders, sometimes we get so caught up in all the meetings and the things that we look up and it's been 3 months since we have done anything to boost morale or shout at anyone out or anything, right? But having someone who owns that is really helpful. So I say, it's simple, right? Do the things, recognize growth, know your teachers. So if you have, and I'm not saying growth like I have 98% mastery, I'm saying like this teacher's been working, busting their butt really hard to work on this new instructional strategy. It may not be the best yet, but they're putting in the effort. Recognize that person. You're sending the message. Yep. Yes, I'm sending the message that I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just looking for effort and coachability, right? So recognize the person who's growing.
Yep, absolutely.
Recognize the data too, for sure. Like, definitely do that. Be really have a truly open door policy. When you feel someone's morale going down, like, what's going on? How can I help? What do you need from me? I often say, go ahead and roll up your sleeves and get in the classroom with them. That's an easy way to build morale. Hey, you're struggling. This is hard for you. I got you. I'm coming in with you and I'm going to co-teach alongside you today. But like a principal or a leader is not going to even know that morale is low if they're in their office. So you've got to be amongst the people in order to even be able to see, is this working or not? Yeah.
You're absolutely right on that. And in that process, regardless of what that leader is implementing, there is going to be pushback. There is going to be resistance. How can they effectively navigate that resistance they might face when they are trying to put out this new strategy?
You've got to be okay with it, and you have to anticipate it. You're going to have people, you can't satisfy everyone. I always say, anticipate the boos. Like someone's going to say boo to your idea immediately. It doesn't care what it is, right? There's always someone, you can be giving away $10,000 and someone's like, I don't want to pay the taxes. Like there's going to be someone who's going to have a bad attitude about whatever it is you're trying to do, right? But a smart leader anticipates that. They anticipate, okay, if I hated this idea, where would be the places I would poke holes in it, right?
That's a big rabbit
Yeah.
hole you can
And
go
you
down
use
to.
that
Yeah.
in your rollout. I talked about storytelling earlier, right? This initiative has to happen because of this. This is why we cannot continue to do what we're doing and why we're making this pivot. I always find
That's the key part
why.
right there. Why we're making this pivot, by the way. You're bringing the earth into
Yeah,
it.
why are we doing
That's
this?
your
Why are we making this change, or why are we implementing this thing? I always go to my biggest naysayer and I run it by them first. Hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing. That's just very strategic leadership. Here's what I'm thinking about doing. Lay it all out. What do you think? Not only is the person flattered that I've asked their opinion first, I've given them time to process. And if we know that they're my typical naysayer, so does everyone else. So if I now roll this out whole staff and they see that this person seems to be on board and doesn't have a lot to say, okay, I win a little bit of that, right? You've got to be able to communicate clearly why we're doing this, the change, and how it aligns again to vision and mission. Be able to listen to those concerns. Be okay with when you're fielding questions. If you don't have the answer or you haven't thought about something, be okay saying, you know what, that's really good. I have not thought about that and considered that yet. Let me come back to you, versus just making up things. How are you going to support?
Absolutely.
So what are the skills and knowledge that teachers or whomever need to implement this change or this policy? Sometimes things fail because we just assume people know how to do something that they just don't know how to do. And then you got to monitor it, provide updates on it, right? Hey guys, we've implemented this new strategy or we've implemented this new initiative. We're 30 days in, here's where we're at. And then lead by example. So if you are running this thing, you got to be in the trenches of it too. And you've got to have your hands in it as well. You cannot be a school leader who sits in their office, disseminates things and sits in their office. That's not going to work either, because people don't like change, and that's okay. We can't anticipate people not always people aren't always going to rally around a thing. But if they trust you as their leader, they will tell you, I disagree, but I trust you and I can follow the plan. I understand the logic. I still disagree. I understand the logic. So I'm willing to give it a try.
Because you've linked it
We as
back.
leaders sometimes we get our feelings hurt because we want everyone to be like, yay. And that's just not realistic.
Yeah. You're so right on that. You can't take it personally. And especially when it's something that your idea to implement, maybe it's something that was told to you that you have to implement and you have to come in and do it. One of the most important parts that people need to understand when change is occurring is that you are moving from incompetence, trying to get back to competence again. And that zone of incompetence, people are making mistakes. But that's what learning is. People are making mistakes in that change process because you're in a level of incompetence.
Yeah, and then people talk a lot about like implementation dip, right? So you have to know anytime you're implementing something, there's going to be a dip. A lot of times we'll get a new curriculum and we're like, oh my God, the scores went down, throw the curriculum out. No, you got to give it some time, because oftentimes there's a dip before you go back up. But people get scared at the dip and then they throw something out.
And depending on what that change is, that dictates the time of the dip. It could be a 1 week thing. It could be a 1 day thing. It could be a 5-year thing until you see a change, right? That's what's important to recognize. Now, Erinn, I want to highlight something, because on your blog posts and through this conversation, it's very clear that communication and transparency are very crucial in what you believe in for optimized approaches. Elaborate on how you assist educators in planning and implementing these strategies through that means of effective.
You're right. Communication is everything. It's those soft skills. So I say all the time, leaders typically will get into a leadership role because they have the technical skills of a job. They're like killing it in the classroom. Their pedagogy is strong, like they've got all the things. But oftentimes we don't recognize like their soft skills, their adaptive skills, those people skills, communication falling under one of them. And then they get into leadership roles and they start to struggle because they're like, I know how to do this technical thing of teaching, but I'm having a really hard time getting everyone else on board with the thing or translating that to someone else. And so first thing is I always am like, you have to be really aware of your adaptive skills and where they are, your strengths and your gaps in those. And communication often is one of those, both verbal and nonverbal. So if you can be really planned in how you're communicating, implementing strategies, that to me is the golden piece right there. So you've got to really first, as you're communicating, where are we currently at? What's the current state of the union on this? What current practices are we using and what needs improvement? What are the trends, right? And what are the true trends? Often, like, we say something is happening in a school and then let's really go see. And then we go look around. It's no, that's happening in 3 classrooms. That's not a trend, right? So that's the other thing too, is really being clear on the assessment analysis of what's happening. And then working with them to be able to draft those goals, but communicate those goals really clearly to people with checks for understanding along the way. I have a mentor who often says to me, summarize for me what what you heard me say. And it's not because she's trying to be insulting, right? But it's because people like hear one thing, take their own stuff, whatever they're feeling or whatever, and then they're like, I heard you say. And it's like, that's not at all what I said, right? And now we walk away with a really unclear understanding, and we can't be unclear on the goals we have to be aligned on that. And then monitoring and support. Like, how are you communicating what monitoring and support looks like? So I often tell folks, I'm gonna be giving you a perfect example. Part of my monitoring support is going to include me observing classrooms. I'm not coming to evaluate you. I'm coming to observe for this specific initiative or strategy so that I know if it's working or not and how to support you. You have to say that, because some teachers see you walking in and assume they are in trouble, right? Or they're being evaluated or something's happening. No, I'm coming because
that means you're not
1,000%, right?
Yeah.
And I always know that when I'm starting with a new client, I always start with just a half day observation. And I remember I had one teacher, when I say hands like this, and I was like, oh, you guys don't observe much here, because she's doing this. The fact that I walked in the room, so that lets me know that you guys don't observe much here. Okay, noted. But you got to say those things, right? Or especially if you have new teachers coming in from out a new building, right? Like, you want to explain, you don't know what happened at their old building. You want to explain, hey, I'm coming in to monitor this thing. Or if I'm asking you to input data into this spreadsheet, I'm asking because I'm trying to figure out where the error is, not because I'm doing it to follow behind you or whatever the case may be. So communicate very clearly why you're making the moves that you're making. That builds trust with people, because nobody wants to feel like, oh, I gotcha.
And going to them is really important as well.
Yes.
You're going to their space of comfort. But on the flip side, you need to have an open door policy there is going to be time where you have to go in and do your own work, but you also have to be willing to drop what you're doing to go and support the people that need your support in the building that you are responsible for.
1,000%. I think that's part of maintaining and building strong relationships, is being present. I think there's ways you get creative as school leaders, right? Like, I know I see a lot of leaders these days who are doing the rolling desk thing. I was on a team where we essentially had a schedule amongst our leadership team where we alternated office kind of work days, right? Where it was like, I knew, hey, Tuesday I is my day to get a lot of my office work days and meetings done. And it's okay because I know my counterpart is in the school streets for me. But guess what? We communicated that to the school. So no one could say, it was like, hey guys, as an admin team, this is what we're doing to better support you guys, but also check the boxes we need to. So you've got to provide regular updates on like the things and the initiatives and all that you've got going on. Have that open door policy. And it's okay to put boundaries around that, but it may be like, hey guys, 3 to 5 every day, my door's open, right? I had a client who I had to tell, just keep your door open, like literally open the door, right? Because even if you are feeling like, I'm willing to take a conversation right now, a door closed signifies, depending culturally or however you were raised, you don't knock on the door. That's it, right? So you've got to be aware that just the fact that you think you're saying I have an open door policy, but your door is physically closed. So to some people that says, do not knock on this door. And he was like, oh my goodness, like, yeah, just open the door. And being able to ensure that you are guiding your leaders and teachers, ask them their opinions, right? Collab with them. I remember spearheading that we were going to actually change our school values. That was not something I did in a silo. It was, hey, pulled in opened it to everyone. We're going to do a focus group around our school values. What do you guys think? It was a huge change, but they were way more bought in because they were there from the beginning to the end of the process, right? It was something we did as a community. Would it have been faster for me to do it by myself? Yes. But what would that have looked like, right? On the buy-in part. And just thinking about
Yep. That's imposed
at all,
leadership. You're not getting buy-in. You're not
right?
establishing ownership.
And then what are the committees that I need in my school, right? What are the folks getting people into things that they're really interested in? That's how you really find out like the gems that you have in your building is I may teach math all year for the last 10 years, but you may find out that I actually am musically inclined and I'm on the end of year production committee every year. So you also have to open up space to learn about those around you. So committees and like task force are really great way to do that. And most importantly, it's just be consistent. Like we're all consistent in something, right? So you can be the leader that's consistently late, consistently doesn't listen, right? You're going to do something consistently, right? What are you consistently doing and what is that communicating to people?
I love that. And are you doing the right things consistently? Because like you just said, you could be doing the wrong things. You know what? You shared something with me. And one of my favorite things to do is actually one of my end of the year messages I send out to my staff. I send out a form and I say, we have an opportunity next year to open a brand new school. It's the same building. It's the same name. It's got the same mission, vision. It's the same place. But you get to pick where you're going. What are you teaching? What do you want to be doing? And I send that form out every year just to see what people say. And it's so cool to see because you learn your HR department might send out staffing intent forms where they indicate what they want to do. And a lot of the time they check off, I'm comfortable where I'm at to stay in the same place. But then on the form you get, you go, I actually want to try this and I want to try that. And this looks really fun. And it's so cool to see. Now, there is such a strong message behind what you're sending on instructional leadership. And with that, leaders need to take risks. What's one of the riskier initiatives you've encouraged a school to undertake and what was their outcome?
Yeah, I love the idea of risk taking in education. I don't think it's something we talk enough about. And so I love, first of all, just that question. I think it's a really great question. And I actually had a school, it was my son's school at the time, actually. And they had this idea of being a project-based learning school, but they were struggling with how that really actually plays out and looks. And so one of the things that we talked about with them was like, okay, and they had the beautiful thing of having 10 kids in a class. And I was like, come on guys, like 10 kids in a class, this could be amazing, right? Like I came from 30 kids in a class. So like 10 kids in a class, like we're not really capitalizing on this. And so we worked on this idea of interdisciplinary projects. And one of the things that they were facing was just like traditional class periods just weren't working with like the time wise, it didn't provide the space that they needed. And so that's another thing. A lot of times we will have great ideas and we don't think about the logistics of these things. And then it fails simply off of logistics, right? So I want people to get risky and creative, but you cannot throw logistics out the window either, right? And so we started with.
And I'm going to put something out there and say the first logistic that you need to consider is that earth. You need to know why you're doing that creative.
So we first considered like a schedule redesign. Okay, let's think about this. Back to that, why do we do the things that we do, right? Because we've always done them. Okay, great. Why does our schedule have to look like this? There's no actual reason why, right? So let's figure out how we make sure that we hit whatever standards we have to hit and make sure that there's rules about amount of times and hours kids need something. We hit that. But let's get really creative and freedom dream around this schedule. Let's get creative around this schedule, right? So we really thought around like schedule redesign. We thought about teacher training and what could that look like, right? We are, as a school, right? Traditionally, when does PD happen? After school. Why does it have to? Why could we not give teachers more time and do like an A-B schedule here and think about that? So we thought about the teacher training that they needed and was realistic about it. Gone are the days sometimes with something initiative like this of let's just do a 60-minute PD every week. They need more than that, right? For that to really work, right? What's the curriculum that we need and what's the community engagement and buy-in? It was a bold initiative, but it did increase engagement. We also had to be really clear with them along the way of this is what it's going to look like in year one. Here's what it should look like in year 2, 3. We did 5 years out of what this looks like. That way, we don't get ahead of ourselves and we feel like, oh, we're not seeing this thing yet. We actually didn't scope out to see that thing yet. We said that's going to start happening in year 3. And so that helps us just stay the course. But it was really about getting really clear about that schedule, and then where can we actually provide the correct amount of support for teachers in a way that also doesn't burn them out and provides them with the support that they need.
Absolutely. And with this, we encourage people to dream. We encourage people to get innovative and creative. There is a line where it can be too much. And again, we're not thinking of that logistical side. So, how do we balance the need for risk taking with also that goal of maintaining optimal
Yeah.
education and
Yeah.
that
So I
optimal
think the other
environment?
thing that's key is like stability, right? Like, how are you creating a stable environment? And I think that's also why when we just talked about consistency and leadership is important too, because if people feel like they don't know what to expect day to day, you may come in and be like, you know what, I've thought about it again, and we're gonna. It creates instability for people, and people cannot thrive in that. And so you want to make sure that you're thinking about, we just talked about this, the gradual implementation. So when I said, for example, like this was actually a 5-year plan. A lot of times we're strategic planning a year for the next year, but we're not thinking about what does this initiative look like truly broken down over time, and then we get ahead of ourselves. For example, so I had a client who I was helping with to implement instructional coaches back into their programming, and about 3 months in, I'm getting complaints, and they're saying this coach doesn't know how to do this, and this coach doesn't know how to do that. And I pulled up the plan and I said they weren't supposed to yet. That was not on the. That's month 8. So, and then the coach is feeling overwhelmed because they're being asked to do something that they haven't been ramped up to do. There's a method to this madness. So you've got to really consider gradual implementation. It maintains the stability. You're doing adjustments incrementally. You're able to get into the data and respond, right, quickly. And it reduces like disruption for folks. Consider pilots, right? Before we decide, hey, the entire school is now using this curriculum, can we pilot it with 4th grade maybe? See how we feel about that? Can we pilot it with a teacher that we feel like will give us quality feedback, right, on that? But again, that requires you to be planned out, because as a teacher, I hate for me to really get good at a curriculum and then you changing my curriculum every other year. Why? So, piloting programs, we know new things come out, new technologies come out every other day, but we can't be like, ooh, shiny red car, right? You've got to be able to pilot programs as well. And then also that aids you in your decision making. But if you decide to go forward, now you can say to a school, again, creating stability, I go, okay, hey guys, as we've been piloting this in 4th grade English for the past year, here's what we've learned and what we've found. And so now, don't you think I'm way more bought in as the 5th grade teacher? I'm way more bought in because I know someone who's tried it and given it a shot. And then just think about the emotional support that you're going to have to be able to provide for your students in your community. Like we said, change is hard. You're going to have the veteran teacher who's, I don't want to change this, or I don't know why we're changing this policy. Excuse me. So it's going to be really important that you provide that support as well.
Very powerful message. Very good advice to give to anybody out there trying to start change, implement change, take that risk. Again, make sure you're rooting it back, because that makes dealing with your fire element a lot easier. And we're nearing the end of this. I'm wondering, what are you hoping people action in their lives tomorrow from your
Honestly, it's
message?
really simple. I really just want people to take a step back and evaluate the support that they're currently providing for those who are in their charge, right? Teachers get a bad rap a lot, and there's some really great teachers out there, and there's some not really great teachers, right? But I believe the vast majority of teachers, even if they lack in skill, they want to be in this field. And so to keep them, right, which benefits kids, what level of support are you truly providing? And just like taking a step back to think about that. Am I in the trenches with them? Am I providing support? If I can't provide the support, have I brought in folks who can provide that support? And then what does my support look like as a leader, right? Am I getting the support I need, right? And then once you zoom out and look at your own development top down, then it's easy to start thinking about, okay, what are some small next steps I need to think about that provide support for my teachers? If I want them there, if I want them supported, if I want to keep adding to their toolkit, that's going to require me to make some changes and prioritize development as a part of what we do at our school.
Yes, absolutely. And Erinn, what
Oh
does your
goodness, I
future
don't
look
know.
like?
We're going to continue to do this work. I love the work that we get to do. My hope is that we get to do it in many more schools around the country. We have a podcast coming, so we're just doing a lot. We're doing a lot to just help folks. I believe that most leaders want to support their teachers. I think some of them just don't know where to start, and so that's our mission is to help them build a culture of coaching.
Love that. And for anybody listening that's wanting to get in touch with you, connect, unpack things, maybe receive some of your coaching themselves.
Yep.
How can they get a
So
hold of you?
I'm not super creative, so they can follow me on Instagram, which is just Erinn Cottman. My website is erincottman.com.
That's probably the best
That's
way
what
to
I
do
say.
it, though. Yeah.
But they can get on our mailing list
Yeah.
there, like everything that we offer. We actually have a lot of free resources on our website that folks can download and implement for free. So if they head over to erincottman.com, they can access that as well.
Alchemists, from happy birthdays to instructional leadership practices and some very powerful conversations with Erinn. It has been my honor to host you and to have you on the show. And I really hope that our listeners are taking away some powerful leadership movements they can action tomorrow. Erinn, thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
I had an absolute blast with you. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Elemental Educator. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Elemental Educator.